back to Cody's Movie Cave, where today, with it still being October and we're right there on the precipice of Halloween, we're going to discuss a scary movie. Well, you know, it's supposed to be scary. It's set in the realm or the genre of horror, but it's not that scary, okay? It's not really creep-tastic or anything like that. And the movie is The Horror of Dracula. Ooh, you know, when you think Dracula, what is the most, standout Dracula performance that you can name off the top of your head? Some people's going to reach way back and go the original Dracula, black and white version from the 30s. He nailed it. He did a good job. Some may say Gary Oldman from Bram Stoker's Dracula. Won't disagree there either. It's a good movie. Good Dracula performance. But what a lot of people don't know and probably hadn't seen is the Hammer films, or the Dracula films, that starred the late, great Christopher Lee. If there was ever a man made to be the antagonist, the villain, the bad guy in all his movies ever made, it was Christopher Lee. The man just oozed menacing sort of bravado, right? I mean, he was just the legend of bad guys, okay? If you don't know who he is, type it up in Google, Christopher Lee, look him up. Odds are you've seen him in something, right? If you watched The Lord of the Rings, he played Saruman, or whatever his name was, the wizard that tricked old Gandalf in the first one and wound up making all the orcs and such. That was him. Or, if you watch Star Wars, guess what? Count Dooku, right? The prequel movies. Really cool character in that as well. Played a bad guy, a villain. Did a bang-up job. Wish he'd have been in more stuff for Star Wars. I like the character Count Dooku. Anyway, so he sort of... His franchise, though, that built his career, that put him on the map as sort of this epic villain, was the Dracula movies, the Hammer Dracula movies. And the first one being Horror of Dracula. I think it came out in 1958. Woo, way back there. Way before my time anyway. But I checked it out and I liked it. It kind of borrows from a little bit from Bram Stoker's original work, his original story. But it kind of tweaks it a little bit, so it's not a standard straight by the books version of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like I said, they kind of play with it a little bit. It's a little different. But man, oh man, does Christopher Lee get to sink his teeth, pun intended, in this role. Man, best Dracula in my opinion, by far. He was a tall guy, right? Really tall, pronounced bone structure in his face that just made him look scary as heck, right? And considering that it came out in the late 50s, early 60s, right there in that benchmark of cinema, it was pretty rough. I mean, there wasn't a lot of gore like what we're used to in modern times, but for that time, it was pretty rough. There was a little bit of blood. Bright red paint, more or less. I mean, we get way more realistic stuff nowadays. But for the time, it was pretty groundbreaking, right? But like I said, it's the story of Dracula. You got all the characters there from Bram Stoker's. Obviously, Dracula. You got Jonathan Harker. You got Van Helsing. You got Mina. All those characters are there, and but they're a little bit different. They're a little placed here and there, kind of not as much as they were kind of at the beginning of the story that Bram Stoker wrote. But man, was it good. It's a good movie. For an old movie, it was really good. I loved the dynamic between Dracula and Van Helsing. This Van Helsing is, I mean, he's a little bit of an older gentleman, but he's not old like he was in the original 30s version of Dracula, and he's not old like he was in Bram Stoker's Dracula that starred Anthony Hopkins. I mean, he's kind of, I'd say probably in his 50s, late 40s, cast somewhere in there. And they do a really good job. They're dynamic together. I forget that actor's name off the top of my head. Forgive me, but I can't think about it, or think of it rather. But him and Christopher Lee would go on to make other sequels in this franchise, and man, they work really well together. So yeah, if you want to see a pretty good version of Dracula, check it out. Horror of Dracula is the first one, and then they kind of spiral down from there. Yeah, like I said, Christopher Lee for me is the definitive version. That, like I said, it's not scary. It's a little kind of on the campy side sometimes, you know, especially the sequels that came afterward. That came in the 70s and late 60s. But this one is good. It's more of a thriller. So it's a quick watch. I want to say it's like an hour and 27, hour and 30, so it's not very long like some of the other ones are. Rather quick, but it's good. Check it out. Horror of Dracula, Christopher Lee, and then the subsequent sequels that came after. All right. As always, this is my opinion, and opinions are like butts. Everyone has one. Some of them stink.
This is the story of Dracula, a creature who destroys all whom he touches. Dracula the terrifying, the feared, who sleeps in the tombs of the dead by day and arises at night to inflict his terror upon the innocent and the unsuspecting.
You must help me. You must. You're my only hope. You must.
I'll help you. I promise. Please try and understand. This is not Lucy, the sister you loved. It's only a shell, possessed and corrupted by the evil of Dracula.
How do you destroy a fiend who has so far proven himself indestructible? Those who come to end his reign of terror stay to become his victims.
Castle Dracula is somewhere here in Klausenberg. Will you tell me how I get there?
You ordered a meal, sir. As an innkeeper, it's my duty to serve you. When you've eaten, I ask you to go and leave us in peace.
This is the doctor who dares to challenge the vampire Dracula. This is the anguished man who fears for the lives of his beloved, the girl who is his sister, and the one that is his wife. Dracula, the bedeviled master of all that is evil.